Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. Today, we are going to dig into a topic that I have been kind of watching from afar. And, you know, I guess I shouldn't even be ashamed to say that it's been a little bit intimidating and really because of my understanding of it. And I was absolutely thrilled to be able to get today's guest to come on and really unfold the realities, the myths, and the opportunities with the digital currency industry. So what's digital currency? Well, probably I think what most folks will be familiar with is Bitcoin. You've heard Bitcoin, and you've probably heard it talked about in so many different ways, from positive to negative to it's you know, some people look at it as Mythcoin, like Bigfoot. Does it really exist, and how does it exist? And so that's what we're going to find out today, because my guest is one of the leading educators and advocates for the digital currency industry, not just for people to collect the digital currency and trade digital currency, but to actually use it in our society, to make it part of our economy, to not only for individuals to be able to participate in the digital currency, but also for businesses to be able to participate and accept it. And really, what I was kind of surprised to learn was the bottom line is how good digital currency can be for a lot of people who have been kind of taken advantage of in the way that our current currency works. Guest today is one of the leaders in the digital currency evolution. He is the founder of Digital Coin Billionaire and the author of the best-selling book, The Seventh Disruption, The Dissolution of Banking. Please welcome to Influencers Radio, Tom McMurrain. Tom, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Jack. Great to be here.
Well, I have to say, most of the things that I've seen on digital currency and particularly around Bitcoin is watch out, you better jump on it. You know, it's been really kind of move without a true understanding of it. And one of the things that, you know, I really consider you a true influencer and that educator and advocate on this is because you don't mind explaining the digital currency industry, and not even just one particular type of digital currency. And we'll get into that. There's multiple types or brands of this, but really you're an advocate of the success and the evolution of the industry as a whole. So I want to jump right out of the gate and ask you to explain, you know, what is the easiest explanation of digital currency as, you know, most people think about it. And obviously, primarily Bitcoin is the one that people see in the headlines. But what's that foundation, that understanding of what digital currency is?
Well, number one, it's the most important technological innovation to happen really in our time in the last 30 or 40 years. And, you know, I talk to people about digital currency. I think the best example that you can think of is a VIN number on a car. A VIN number, like on the Ford Taurus in 2005, every VIN number is unique. And they only made a certain number of Tauruses in that year. And a VIN number basically is synonymous with a digital coin. Calling it a digital coin is really a misnomer because people think of physical coin. There is no physical coin. So it's not really the right name for it. But when you think of digital currency, if I'm going to trade value with you, let's say that we both have, I have a Denali and you have a Ford Taurus and we want to trade cars, we actually will trade VIN numbers. And the VIN number is the long serial number on your car. And so it's unique to that car. And if each one has value, and people say, well, how's the value of a digital coin generated, very much like cars are, by an auction process. So you have an exchange, which is called a car auction, that when those Ford Tauruses go through there, they are sold for a certain price. And then, of course, that price ends up in the Kelly's Blue Book, which would kind of be your trade ledger that tells you how much the car is worth. And so digital coins, to me, I think the best example I can give, they're like VIN numbers on cars. And when we trade cars, we don't really trade cars, we trade titles that have the VIN number printed on it. So I hope that makes sense. It's the best way I've heard to explain it to people. And how you determine the value of the coin, of course, is through an auction process. In our business, we would call that a coin exchange. And
I think probably a lot of people, some of the stories you see and news and people kind of swaying the whole population's ideas about this is at that virtual piece of it, because that kind of gets scary to some people. And I think the way you described it is, I guess back in the days with stocks, people actually had stocks certificates that they held in their hands. But I guess now that just represents that people do that without ever seeing those certificates. Right. So when you have this, the coins, the digital coins that have this representative of value, the next thing that people ask is, hey, what does the government think about this? What does the banking system think about this? And do they participate in this at all?
That's a good question. The United States has legislation in place. There's a lot of people don't think that Bitcoin and digital currencies are regulated. They actually are, very much so. And so that dispels one myth about it being for drug dealers and pirates and money launderers. That just doesn't happen within our industry. But when you think about where we're heading with this, banks are getting into it. You saw a recent article where Citigroup has just announced that they're going to launch their own Citi coin. There's a lot of banks that are understanding it. JP Morgan, the head of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, he blasted it like 2 years ago. Recently, in his shareholder report, he said, I may have been wrong about Bitcoin, and digital currency in general, and I thought that was really powerful. But to see where the government, as long as the government's getting their taxes and it's helping facilitate business, in the United States amongst the banked and the unbanked, the United States doesn't have a problem with it. The only thing the United States has a problem with is anonymous transactions and companies that don't comply with Know Your Customer. So there actually is a lot of legislation in place to regulate cryptocurrencies, and they are creating jobs in the United States, high-paying jobs because they are technology jobs, and it's helping increase the flow of business. So there's over 130 countries where cryptocurrency is legal, and it's definitely something that's good for an economy. It runs parallel to the U.S. dollar. The only difference between a digital coin and the dollar is the dollar typically deflates, and digital currencies, if there's a huge demand for them, they increase in value, they appreciate. And so I always tell people, say, if you wanted to own a currency, would you rather have one that depreciates or one that appreciates? And that's why I'm a huge fan of digital currency, because it has that opportunity to increase in value, and it's really not tied to the U.S. economy.
And I guess that's an important point. That probably makes it a lot more attractive to all these other countries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to think of Bitcoin is the only universal coin in the world that can be used in every economy, and it's at the same value in every economy. So it is a universal currency that can be used anywhere in the world. I mean, there's coffee shops you can go over to in Europe, and you can walk in with your digital wallet and sell one of your digital coins, and they'll give you cash on the spot at a coffee house. So there's trading houses, there's businesses all over the world. Over 150,000 businesses take Bitcoin right now.
Well, so let's talk about Bitcoin for a moment. One of the best ways that I've heard you describe this, and what it really started to click with me, is when you made the analogy of Bitcoin with Napster. And for those that have been, into, music and online for, I guess it's only been 10 years or so, or, I guess up to, maybe 15 years. Napster was kind of this online, these guys that started to figure out the trading or the commerce of music online versus buying physical CDs and tapes. And really what they did was disrupt the music industry from the way it was. And the way that you explain it, Bitcoin kind of disrupted the monetary system in the same way that Napster disrupted the music industry. Can you kind of go into that parallel?
Well, yeah. I mean, a kid with 1,000 lines of code disrupted the entire music industry. And people say, well, yeah, Napster lost in court and they were out of business. But the truth is the music industry was dead on arrival when they went into court. Their main core value chain had been broken by Napster. And when Satoshi Nakamoto published the white paper in 2008 about being able to do a peer-to-peer transaction, very much like Napster was a peer-to-peer music sharing site, but the ability to do a peer-to-peer consensus-based transaction without the need of a middleman, Satoshi pulled out some bolt cutters and he cut the main value chain of the payment transaction industry, which is ultimately the heart and soul of the banking industry. And so, I'm not saying that the banking industry is going to go out of business, but if they don't join in or really take a serious look at blockchain technology and Bitcoin, they could suffer the same fate. And Napster, other companies spawned on after Napster. I think there was LiveWire and LimeWire and a couple others that came out. Well, when you look at our industry, another great analogy that I use is there was, when we first got on the internet in 91, and by the way, in 91, everybody thought that the internet was for pirates, drug dealers, and pornographers. Just like they think in money launderers, just like they think about digital currency today, the only difference is digital currency is probably going to be a much bigger disruption than the internet was. And so we call ourselves the HTTP of finance. But when you think of the analogy, when I first got on the internet, I think I had a MindSpring account, and I had to put in gateways and IP addresses, and you really had to be sophisticated to get online. And then a company called AOL came on, and everybody remembers there were CDs. If you're a baby boomer, you remember having an AOL CD because they were in every magazine that you picked up on the shelves. You got them in the mail unsolicited. They must have printed more CD-ROMs than any company in history. And there's other companies that are coming along now. Bitcoin is kind of the Napster. Now Napster, the leader, who leveraged the idea of Napster? Well, Apple did with iTunes. Who leveraged the idea of CompuServe and Netscape and MindSpring? Well, AOL did. So there's a disadvantage to being a first mover in the space, and I think Bitcoin, unfortunately, was I know they were a first mover, but they got the disadvantage. And other companies like OneCoin have come along, and in less than, 10 months have got twice as many users as Bitcoin because they figured out how to make it user-friendly. They figured out how to make it PayPal-like, where everything's on one platform and you don't have to be a 32-year-old white computer geek to understand it. And unfortunately, Bitcoin has kind of been classified that you've got to be a computer geek, and it's not really true. That's not true. There are some Bitcoin sites out now that are just as user-friendly, like Coinbase and Blockchain. There's some great websites out there that can help people get on to digital currency without having to set up mining operations and all kinds of they try and make it look very complicated, and it's not. But companies are leveraging the mistakes of what Bitcoin made, and they're really taking it to a whole nother level, and I'm excited about that. Well,
and I think you made an important distinction there with Bitcoin and that Napster analogy, because obviously, regardless of where Bitcoin, there's a lot of smart people that learn from Bitcoin's either mistakes or Bitcoin's kind of walk into new territory that's never been, it was uncharted territory really, and was smart enough to learn from mistakes and go through the bumps. And obviously, I think it's fair to say without a Napster, we wouldn't know iTunes as we did now. And so while iTunes is obviously a big name in the music, there's obviously a lot of other music streaming and commerce sites. So I think one thing I want to kind of make sure and kind of put a spotlight on is that a lot of people see Bitcoin as the digital currency industry. But the fact is, they're just one, I guess, what would you call them, option, or what's the term that would be used? There's a lot of different types of coins other than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is not the digital currency industry. It's part of the digital currency industry. Help us understand how that, works and how people know, am I using the right one? How do I know that this is real coin versus is this just, Uncle Joe's coin that they made up? How does that work?
Well, let me clarify something. Bitcoin with a lowercase c is the technology platform that Bitcoin with a capital C runs on, and Bitcoin with a capital C is the actual currency. So if you, Jack, wanted to create your own currency, there is a website that you can go to and create Jack's coin, and you can create monetary policy on your coin. You can be Ben Bernanke for a day, and you can actually create your own Bitcoin, just like some of the music stars have done. Kanye West has created the Kanye coin, I think, and there's been a whole bunch of, I know that Mike Tyson just launched his own coin. So there are going to be lots of people. If you have celebrity status and you have access to the masses, you'll be able to create your own coin and create your own distribution. And it's just really going to be interesting. But I want to say this about, the example I just gave. Bitcoin, the more coins there are, the more awareness it creates. And I believe there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of coins around the world. Ecuador just introduced their own coin. I think you'll see banks, every bank will end up issuing their own coin. And those coins will probably run on Satoshi Nakamoto's software that he uploaded to the internet in 2009. Over 40 million computers run the Bitcoin software, making it the largest and most powerful peer-to-peer computer network in the world. In fact, that computer network is 450 times stronger than all of the supercomputers in the United States combined. And so if you think about it, my balance of my Bitcoin account is on a ledger on all 40 million computers. So if 20 million of them go down, I still have my balances on 20 million computers. And all of them could go down except for one computer. And as long as that one computer is live, the ledger and the balance of every Bitcoin account in the world is on that computer. And so it's really an amazing network. When you think about peer-to-peer, it's much like Napster was, that if you wanted to download a song, you downloaded it from like 20 people's computer at one time. So it's a decentralized sharing network, if you will, of information and data. But Bitcoin is a consensus-based financial network where you do not need a middleman to verify if Jack's got the money in his account. If you send me 50 Bitcoins, your account is deducted 50 Bitcoins and mine is increased by 50 Bitcoins, and all the computers that are in the network verify that you and I both did that transaction. And it's an amazing system without a fee. Now, the largest transaction in the world for Bitcoin was done about 2 months ago. Somebody transferred $100 million in one transaction. It happened instantaneously, and it was done without any fee. And that sent a shot around the world, because that says, wow, we can do business without banks.
That is really amazing. And, you made me think about something when you talked about how, these transactions are on all these computers, because I remember when Napster, when they actually lost their court battle and they were forced to turn their, servers or their computers off, the Napster computers off, it didn't stop. Because
you're right. And it won't stop with Bitcoin. The only way to shut down the Bitcoin network is to shut down the entire internet in every single country in the world.
And I think,
and even then, the computer people will create mesh networks, and they're still going to run it. So it would be very, very difficult to stop. Digital currency cannot be uninvented. It cannot be stopped, and it's here forever. And I love the saying, one of my mentors, Andreas Antonopoulos, he says that, first the banking industry ignored us, and then they laughed at us, and then they started to fight, and then we won. Because by the time they start fighting, it's game over. Everybody already has it, and they're so far behind the eight ball. But we're in the laughing phase right now. They're not ignoring us anymore. Even when you see, like, the head of the OCC, the Officer Comptroller in the United States, issues a statement that he believes that Bitcoin and digital currency technology could be the most revolutionary thing to ever happen to our financial system. That's the head of the Comptroller Office of the United States government. And that's the kind of attention that digital currency is getting right now. And what's amazing is 80% of the people in the United States don't even know what Bitcoin is.
And that's what is, I think, is amazing to me, because, you know, and I think what you're doing for a lot of people is making it real. And I don't even like to, you know, say that you're legitimizing the digital currency industry. I think what you're doing is shining a light on the legitimacy of it. And I think one of the things when people are wondering, well, if it's, you know, legitimate, why is the you know, the government, or why is the banking industry, you know, not necessarily ignoring it, but against it sometimes, you know, that. And I think one of the things you just pointed out was, what was it, $100 million transaction? $100 million transaction. $100 million transaction that happened without any fees. And I think right there probably is one of the big reasons why it is being fought or in the laughed at stage, because this is not something that they want to happen, just like the music industry didn't want Napster to happen. I remember hearing stories about American Express back when their biggest moneymaker was traveler's checks, because it was
That's right.
that people, you know, charged
within our lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. They made money because people purchased the checks and then left the money with them to use and, you know, grow on. And right now, I think what people think about fees, credit card fees, transaction fees, it's almost just become part of our vernacular. It's just something we accept, that in order to give someone else money for something, somebody's going to be skimming something off the top for doing nothing but facilitating that transaction. Is that, you think, one of the biggest advantages of digital currency is to remove those transaction fees? And I think to a lot of us, some of those are negligible. They're not very much, but there's a lot of people that take advantage of people that need to transact money, a lot of them in different economic situations, that it's almost, you know, if they were lenders, it would be considered loan sharking. It would be against the law. So let's talk about that, those transaction fees. And do you see that as one of the big reasons that
I think you're talking about, there's three missions really behind digital currency, and of course you've just touched on one. The banking industry takes advantage of the poorest population. You know, when you transfer money, you know, via a money transfer service, whether it's, you know, Western Union or MoneyGram or any of those companies, and I'm not picking on any one, I'm picking on all of them. they take, you know, an average of 23% of the transaction from the poorest people who cannot afford it. And then when you think about, I remember when I did my first ATM transaction, the fee was 25 cents. I did one the other day and it was $3. And I'm like, wow, that's a 10-time increase in my lifetime of fees. And what innovation has happened in the banking industry that has really helped society? There hasn't been much. And some would argue that the credit card has been the only innovation that the banks have done. But I think there's a bigger mission behind. Well, of course, we can look at what's going on in Greece right now. There's a lot of people that wish they would have had Bitcoin before the liquidity crisis, because right now they're faced with a liquidity crisis. I think they get $50 a day or something like that, and they're lined up at the ATM machines, but most of them they're going to, that the ATM machines are out of money, and so they've got to wait till the next day. And there was something very significant that happened in the last month, and somebody anonymous sent 1,000 Bitcoin ATM machines to Greece. And I want you to think about something. There was a company called Blockbuster at one time. You know, it was a video rental place. And Blockbuster was everywhere. I mean, Huizenga was the man, owned football teams, owned everything. And in a very short time, Netflix came along and put a dent in their business. And another company called Redbox came along and put the stake in their coffin. And when you think about Netflix and Redbox. Redbox is like an ATM machine for movies. And if I go around and I put a whole bunch of ATM machines around the world with Bitcoin, I've created distribution for the coin and I've eliminated the need for banks. So what's going to happen in Greece, and I think the reason the person gave these machines anonymously is because they're going to prove the red box phenomenon. They're going to put them all around Greece, and people are going to realize that they don't need banks anymore. And I don't know about you, but I rarely go into a bank anymore. I'm either online with my mobile app or I'm at an ATM machine. That's the only time I really use banking services. And red box really will show the rest of the world that as long as these boxes are around, we don't need all these expensive bank buildings. Maybe the banks can reinvest back in the public. But the third underlying mission with Bitcoin and digital currency is there's 2 billion people online. 1 billion of them have access to banking services. And to be frank, the banking industry doesn't want anything to do with the rest of the world. There's 6 billion people that are unbanked. And if you're a mission-oriented person like I am, and you understand that where there's organized financial services, poverty and violence decreases, and we have a lot of violence and poverty in the world. And come to find out, when a Kenyan farmer can transact money via SMS message to somebody in California to send them special seeds that will grow in Kenya that will bring them a bigger harvest, you now connected that Kenyan farmer to the rest of the world and given him an opportunity or her an opportunity to compete in global business. And that to me is one of the coolest things. And I'll say this, I believe that digital currency is the ultimate weapon of peace. I think if it proliferates around the world and people have the ability to have access to organized financial services because of digital currency without the fees, I believe that digital currency is the ultimate weapon of peace, and it will lift people out of poverty. And that's what gets me up every day, Jack. I'm so excited about what we're doing in this space.
Well, I think, what you just described, it brings an incredible amount of clarity to the phrase disrupting the monetary system. And if there's any kind of doubt or vagueness about what it means to disrupt the monetary system, you just talked about that, about how Redbox and Netflix disrupted what people would think, Blockbuster was, here to stay, that it would have taken, a long time to topple something like that. But you saw that kind of went away very, very quickly and left people's minds very, very quickly when that disruption started. Now, I want to get into the topic of, your book, and also how digital currency is what you call the seventh disruption. And so in order to frame that, kind of talk about the previous 6 disruptions. And I think, once people understand that the way that I did, would very, very quickly, you see the exact same thing happening with digital currency, with the rejection, the doubt, the fear, that went along with all the previous disruptions, and now how they become, just de facto way of living. So as the 7th disruption of digital currency, what do you see the other 6 disruptions, the previous 6 disruptions, as being?
Well, I guess let me first start with my definition of disruption. A disruption is a breaking of a value chain in a company, industry, or government that is core to its existence. And a disruption really redefines and it reshapes human culture. So when I started looking for the disruptions, it's really since the baby boomers have been alive, I came up with 6 of them that not only generated trillion-dollar industries, but they actually reshaped human culture and human behavior. And the first one was obviously TV. The detractors, when TV first came out, the technology of TV, people would say, why would I want to watch somebody on TV when I can see them live? But we know that TV disrupted the whole theater industry. It disrupted a lot of things. And the news industry, the print industry, and so when you think about TV, look at everything that came out of TV, cable TV, Seinfeld, CNN, Fox, reality shows, Bachelor, American Idol. I mean, the amount of icons that I came up with and logos when I was doing my research was staggering. How many multi-billion-dollar companies have come out of TV, and it created a trillion-dollar industry. That was the first disruption. The internet which we all are very much aware of, was another disruption. And it's very simple to say that the internet in 91, I was there, and I was trying to explain it to people. My wife wanted nothing to do with it because she thought it was for, drug dealers and hackers and pornography, and she just didn't understand it at all until AOL came out, and she could load a CD-ROM on and get on the internet real easy, and then she loved it. But internet disrupted the publishing industry. Now a person with a blog, with a Twitter account and a blog in Egypt could have the same authority or power as CNN. And that was amazing. And we've seen a real example of that, obviously, where somebody with a Twitter account and a blog disrupted Egypt, a country. And so the internet's been very powerful. And there are companies, entertainment companies like TMZ that are multi-billion-dollar enterprises now, and they consist of a small office with a blog and reporters that are going around using their mobile phones for reporting. And then, of course, we saw email. So that's the second disruption. Then we saw email come along. And a lot of the detractors in the beginning said, "Oh, I'll never share my information over the internet." But I thought it was amazing. I looked at that and I said, "Wow, I can send a message to somebody in California or anywhere in the world." And I remember explaining this to my wife, and I said, "We can send messages for free. We don't have to go to the post office anymore." And the post office at the time was one of the most profitable organizations in the United States government. In fact, I think it was the only profitable one. And today the post office is losing $80 billion a year, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it because it's draining money left and right. So email, you look at Hotmail and AOL, You Got Mail, and you look at Gmail and all the billion-dollar companies that have created since of that disruption. And then, of course, so that was the third disruption. The fourth disruption, which we're all familiar with, is mobile. Mobile's disrupted a lot of things in our life, including our lifestyles. We're mobile everywhere we go. Look at people at lunch now. It's disrupted lunch. It's disrupted people's driving habits, but it disrupted all of the bell companies. It caused really the breakup of all of them, and you look at what's going on in the mobile industry, but you got Verizon, you got T-Mobile, you've got BlackBerry, you got Android. Look at all of the iPhone. Multi-$100 billion industries created off of that disruption. And then, of course, e-commerce. How many of you said, "I'll never put my credit card into a website to buy anything"? I probably buy 99% of everything. I live on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, but Amazon is like my best friend. But look at Amazon and Zappos and eBay, and look at all of the e-commerce sites that are out there now that everybody shops on. And they say that what will e-commerce disrupt? They're saying there'll be less malls. There'll be more malls closed in the next 10 years than there are open. And we've already seen that in our area in Atlanta. There's at least 5 malls that are completely vacant now. So e-commerce has just rattled the retail industry. And social media would be the sixth disruption. You look at the dating industry, Match.com. Look at what LinkedIn has done to the job placement industry. Totally wiped it out. And LinkedIn is the biggest job placement company in the world now. And so when you attack a value chain of a core industry, a core value chain that is important to its existence, you are a disruptor. And each one of those technology platforms that I just mentioned, they all were major disruptions, not only in our human culture, but in our human behavior. So those are the 6 disruptions, and that leads me to digital currency. And like I said, when Satoshi Nakamoto, when he published that white paper, the industry laughed at him. He said, "I can create a transaction, a consensus-based transaction without the need of a middleman." And the world laughed at him. 6 months later, he published a software that runs on 40 million computers today, and trust me, the industry is not laughing anymore because they realize how significant it is, but they still don't grasp it. And I think the big disadvantage that the banking industry has is they're so highly regulated. Now, they've regulated themselves and pigeonholed themselves to where they can't really even compete when it comes to innovation. It's almost an anti-innovation industry because they're afraid of violating the myriad of laws that are put in place with With Bitcoin, with the Bitcoin platform, it's innovation without permission. If you want to build a financial app on the Bitcoin platform, if you want to go create your own cryptocurrency, you don't have to ask for permission. You can go create Jack's Coin tomorrow and be in business and let all of your readers know that you have your own currency. And that's just something the banking industry doesn't understand.
And it is, and it makes perfect sense, especially with the whole description of the seventh disruption, because each one of those disruptions that you talked about, TV, obviously they disrupted the print news industry, and each one of these industries that they disrupted went through those phases of, the ignoring them and laughing at them, and like you talked about, but ultimately, it evolved, and that's what you're doing, is the evolution of digital currency. What you talked about earlier with, about these, countries and places where right now, the goal is let's get them clean water and food. You actually see a time when, they can participate in commerce and be able to take advantage of things like this through digital currency. So if we jump ahead and people say, okay, I understand the concept. I see that this is different than, maybe what I had thought it was. And I see that it's definitely has a little bit more, foothold than I thought it did. What does it take to get involved with the digital currency? Because I think there's a lot of, at least perception that, this seems a little bit technical, or there's, where do I even begin to get currency? And there's ways of, do I trade it? Because people talk about trading it, because the value of these coins going up. And then you hear terms like mining, coins, which takes me back to the days of gold and silver, raw gold and silver. We had miners, getting the raw materials for the value. There's also kind of analogy of that with digital currency. Can you kind of talk about these different angles and how the average person can get involved and where they should start with getting involved in it?
Sure, yeah. There's three ways you can get involved in digital currency. As you mentioned, the last one you just mentioned, I'll start with that first. Mining is an odd term to use in the financial industry. Even though when you think about gold mining and the gold rush, mining means you're in at the very beginning and you've got your pick and you've got your sift and you've got your bucket and your dynamite or whatever, and you're going to go out and mine raw materials. Well, when you're doing mining, basically what it means is you're getting the coins at wholesale. And mining is a process where a computer figures out mathematical equations that unlock coins and deliver them to your e-wallet. And mining is good. And then really, I tell people, you don't fully have to understand that. Have you heard the saying? It says, I don't understand how a brown cow eats green grass and produces yellow milk or white milk and yellow cheese. You don't really have to understand that process. Just know that mining is a process of getting the coins at wholesale. So when you have a mining opportunity, you should be excited about it because you're getting the coins at wholesale. And when they hit your e-wallet, they have a retail value, okay? And so, I mined some coins recently with one coin in May that were at 43 cents, and by the time they hit my e-wallet, they were worth over $2.25 a piece. So I saw an immediate value. So if you're the type of person that likes getting a good deal, mining is a good deal. You just have to wrap your head around it. And the newer companies are making it easy for mining. You don't have to set up the computers. They have the mining operations built into the back office, and you just say, I want to apply X dollar amount towards mining, and they will mine the coins for you, and they'll put them in your e-wallet. And so mining is very important. The second way that you can get coins is you can be a place of business, and you can accept, Bitcoin or digital currencies. And you really just have to go onto the platforms. I know like BitPay.com, which is an Atlanta-based company. I'm not affiliated with them, but I know that Ashton Kutcher invested in them. But BitPay will allow you to become become a merchant for digital currencies. So you can say, I'm going to start accepting digital currencies, and that's another way to do it. The other way is just purely through education and going out onto an exchange and buying the coins directly. So like Coinbase, you can go to Coinbase.com or blockchain.com. or blockchain.info, and you can actually go on, set up an e-wallet. If you've ever set up a PayPal account, it's very similar. They're going to ask for your ID, and they're going to do a telephone verification. They have to do all the know your customer rules, just like the banking industry does. And they will set up an account for you, and then you can go in and purchase one Bitcoin, which today is about $289 or $269. It fluctuates because of the values on an exchange. But the thing I want everybody to do, I want everybody to go set up an e-wallet and at a minimum buy a tenth of a Bitcoin. That's about $28. And then go to 1-800-Flowers.com or go to iTunes or go to one of the 150,000 businesses around the world and spend that $28 and realize that you just did a transaction outside of a government-issued currency. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you do that transaction, you've just conducted the transaction outside of a government-issued currency. And to me, it's kind of liberating, especially with what was going on in the world today with the stock market dropping like crazy and China devaluing their currency. There's a lot of people that are looking for a plan B. You know, they're kind of preppers, if you will. But there's also that group out there that says, hey, I think over the next 10 years, this industry is going to create the equivalent of the Ciscos, the Sun Microsystems, the IBMs, the digital currency industry. 10 or 15 years from now, Jack, there will be logos like BitPay that will all be multi-billion and $100 billion companies, and you could have said, gee, I could have been in on the beginning of that industry. And you can either be in front of the wave and ride it, and it's still a little off in the horizon, but it's there and it's coming, or you can be on the backside swimming up it. And right now, if you're looking for the next big thing, digital currency is it.
Well, you know what? I think, you know, what you just said is one of the reasons why I consider you an influencer. And I think it really shines a light on, you know, your willingness and ability to educate folks and be a true advocate for them, because I want to make sure that we put a spotlight on this and not let it kind of slide under what you just said, because I think that is probably the most simple and powerful way for people to not just hear or learn, but to experience digital currency. And you're saying that anyone, if they can, no special computer knowledge or technical knowledge or anything, can you walk through that process one more time? They can simply go to...
Yeah, they can simply go to like Coinbase or blockchain. They can go set up an e-wallet online, or they can go to OneCoin and they can set up an e-wallet online, and they have the ability to either mine currencies or accept currencies. But the average person for this first transaction, I suggest that you just buy some digital currency on the exchange, and then once it's in your e-wallet, go find a vendor that takes Bitcoin. And you can simply, and there's all kinds of websites that show you maps of every business around the world. I mean, you got like Dell, Microsoft, 1-800-Flowers, Reed Jewelers, the biggest jeweler in the United States takes Bitcoin. There's so many companies that take Bitcoin, and a lot of people don't realize that PayPal has an interface with Bitcoin. United Way is the biggest donee of Bitcoin. They have the ability to accept Bitcoin. They're the biggest acceptor of Bitcoin for charities. So there's a lot of big names that are in this industry. And I tell people, just pay attention to where the smart money is. Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape and the largest venture capital fund in the United States, really in the world, says Bitcoin, this technology, digital currency, will change everything. People like Tim Draper with the Draper Funds are investing in it. Richard Branson is investing in it. Michael Novogratz from Fortress Investment, $55 billion fund, he's personally investing in it. There's just, the names are staggering of the people that are involved. Peter Diamandis, Peter Thiel, the biggest names in the industry. The smart money is in digital currency. Jack, you should be too.
Yeah, it is just really tremendous. And I think what you've done is really clear up a lot of misunderstanding or just not even misinformation, but lack of any depth of information around what this is. People want to find out more about Tom McMurra and digital currency and the whole evolution of it. How can they find out?
They can go to digitalcoinmillionaire.com, or if they want to learn more about the seventh disruption, they can go to the7thdisruption.com. And that's 7, you got to put the number in there, the7thdisruption.com. All
right. And I certainly want to encourage folks to check out The Seventh Disruption, the dissolution of banking, the book. And I think you're truly a pioneer in. There's pioneers of people that develop the technology, but there's got to be someone to unfold the opportunities and really explain it for people to be able to understand and take advantage of it. And I think you're one of those people that people should be paying attention to if they want a true understanding of the realities of digital currency. So I want to thank you so much for being on Influencers Radio today and sharing this information.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, there you have it. Tom McMurrain. Definitely check out Seventh Disruption, the dissolution of banking, digitalcoinmillionaire.com. We'll have the links here on the post on Influencers Radio. And until next time, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/influencersradio.